This next panel is something I'm a little bit more comfortable with, and that's technology. Like I said, I'm an engineer, and so I'm going to bring out Dr. Cardenas again, and Ed Young, Ed comes from a hip-hop perspective, but Ed also is a technologist, but one of the co-founders of the Source magazine, so he has a really interesting perspective on this whole healthcare. Wife is a doctor, right? And you've built some tools, but I'm going to start because, again, we just got off the Super Bowl. I'm going to start with Dr. Cardenas. And did we talk about your role with the NFL? I think we did a little bit earlier.
Yes. So one of the hats that I wear is I am the vice chair of the Head, Neck, and Spine Committee, which creates the protocol, revises it. In fact, next week we'll be doing so at our combine meeting. And then I oversee the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant program. So those are the people with the red hats that go into the tent with the team physician.
That's pretty amazing. And again, one of the things that was really interesting to me in talking about this, again, I played football when I was young, and we didn't have any of that. My father played with a leather helmet with no kind of face guard, right? I have the pictures to prove it. But, technology has evolved slowly. Sometime maybe not even for the better. My father said they were more conscious of head injuries when they didn't have the face mask, right? But you were sharing something with me the other day about the helmets that middle schoolers in West Virginia, right? And again, no disrespect to West Virginia, but they're not on the, they're not California. They're not a really wealthy economy. But the technology that you guys, through the grace of the Rockefeller family, the Neuroscience Institute, and I guess the government have come together. Just tell us about the technology that these middle schoolers are using and how it really impacts them as they play the sport that they love.
Absolutely. If you go right now to the NFL's website and you look at the helmet poster, the number one helmet is something called the Riddell Axiom helmet. And this is the technology that's in that helmet. It has been amazing. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we've just seen amazing changes in material science that have made these helmets safer, not unlike what we've seen in the automobile industry to make cars safer. And so this very same helmet, if you are an NFL athlete and you want this helmet, you have to have your hair, you have to have it custom fitted. They scan your head, they custom fit the pad, and they send it to you. So we did this for 100 middle school athletes in West Virginia, specifically in Marion County, which is not known for its wealth, as you noted. And moreover, the Riddell people came out, they scanned their heads, they custom fitted these helmets, and these helmets have sensor technology in them so that we can monitor the impact location. So if they're leading with the crown of their helmet, we can say, hey, coach, they're going to hurt themselves or somebody else. If the other sensors, we can look at frequency, so we can say, you are doing a great job, you're not exposing your kids to too many head impacts, or conversely, hey, your peers are not hitting as often as you are. You gotta dial it down and improve the safety of your athletes.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about data and kind of collecting and even structuring the experiments to get the data in a bit. I want to talk to Ed, though. I don't want to you to sit out this conversation.
I'm fascinated.
Me too, right? But I want to start with an innovation that really is not a technical innovation, but you, as one of the co-founders of the Source magazine, 5 mics, right? There were 5 stars and thumbs up and all this stuff, but why it's relevant today is one of the very early 5-star albums was De La Soul Is Dead.
Absolutely.
And, again, great album. If you haven't listened to it, if you don't own a copy of it, please buy it and do yourself that favor. But just talk about how you guys took a standard rating system and made it the vernacular of a culture.
That's very interesting because I never thought that we were making it the vernacular of a culture. People coined us the Bible of hip hop. That was not coming from us. I was on the business side. So Jonathan Schechter and James Bernard were the editorial side. But collectively, I think we did come up with the 5 mics. It may have actually been David Mays, who is the one who started the one-page newsletter. But it was something that we felt was important because, and I would always argue this from the business side, that if we wanted to succeed, we had to give value to our customers. There were 2 customers. The main ones were the readers of the magazine. The secondary ones were the advertisers. And if we gave value to the readers, our readers would trust who we took as advertisers, so we were more valuable. So you could never do what people paid you to do because they were going to advertise. It had to serve the readers first and foremost. And as I think out of that understanding that the readers knew that we were looking out for them, that's how our stuff became established as, hey, we can trust these people, because that's all we were doing.
Amazing. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're doing it for a business reason, and it just happened to result in innovation.
Yeah, but you know, when we were doing it, we were what, 21 years old? We were still undergrads in school, and so we're doing this, and to me, that's just obvious. To serve who you're supposed to be right by. And that was not when my colleagues who were like publishers and everything, they were in their 50s and were, young man, you can't do that. And I'm like looking at them going, what's wrong with you? Like, how'd you make money all this time? And, fortunately, we were successful in doing this. It was a very different mindset.
Well, and I'm going to take the conversation in a bit of a different direction, right? So we're talking about the source, and you can't have the conversation with the source without talking about James Bernard, right? And he, I don't know, you should share the story. And then, Dr. Cardenas, I want you to listen to Ed's story and kind of think about the innovations and, how we could have helped James. I'm sorry.
No, so you.
And again, we're this part of this conference is good health, and we're talking about loss, and so I didn't know James well, right? But you did, obviously. So
James was one of the co-founders, and it just became public a couple of weeks ago that James passed away. James was going through stuff that I didn't know you were going to bring this.
No, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Again, the vulnerability piece is important, right? So I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's necessary. And watching this stuff today and being here with everybody, it's important. So James was going through things, and I didn't really know, none of us knew who were James's friends. And, we had been through a lot together. We're 21 years old. James was at Harvard Law School when we partnered up. And actually, he was in Harvard Law School with Barry Obama, who went on to do some cool stuff. But, so... So James had actually, this is the part people don't necessarily know, but I think it was in the Times, and it needs to be known. James disappeared in March 2024, and he walked into the woods, and he was a missing person for quite some time. And it turns out he walked into the woods and it was ending himself. And, I realized a couple of weeks ago, Questlove somehow found out, I don't know who he was talking to. My phone starts ringing early in the morning because Questlove posted on social media, because he's always on social media. Now, we had known James was missing, but it hadn't been established that he was dead. And I realized, and this is one of those things, and this is what, in my mind, James was living a life somewhere, and I was going to run into him traveling or something. And that, anyway.
So, and again, I'm sorry to make you recount that story, but again, as we're talking about good health, mental health is critically important.
That's why it's so hard, because none of us knew. He was suffering, and we didn't know.
Well, and truthfully, there's a lot of stigmas around this. I mean, think about it, just like we would call someone a crackhead, right, and disrespect them for an addiction that we now know more about, that maybe that's not their fault, kind of entirely. We still call people crazy.
Okay, my mom, I grew up in a household, my mother was a psychiatric social worker.
Right.
And so one of the things that, and this is where I say this all the time.
And I want to, when you're talking, again, I want Dr. Cardenas to kind of answer this. Again, it's good. I want him to think about kind of like, given that circumstance, what technology, what innovations exist to maybe result in a different outcome from the early days, right? And we don't know what was wrong, but kind of from the early days to the time that he walked into the woods, if that makes sense. But go ahead, Ed.
So one of the things that, I grew up, my mom, we had crazy people around all the time because she's a psychiatric social work. One of the things that I want us as a community writ large to be able to do is to destigmatize that stuff. You can't say that it's okay to be vulnerable, but act like these things are those things not to be spoken. You can't have it both ways. Say crazy. If it's crazy, don't have stigma. If you have a mental illness, treat it like it's having a cold. You're not ashamed to say, I got a cold. You know, if you have a cold, you tell people.
But language matters, and that's why I said,
Right,
you know,
and-
crazy
right.
is, you know, a derogatory term, right?
It should, but
yeah.
that's my point. It shouldn't be. We need to destigmatize these things because until we do that, people will not come forward. And that's a fundamental problem, that we want things both ways. We want cake, we want to eat it too, and we want it to last forever.
Respect.
Right.
Yep.
And
So
it's
I want Dr. Cardenas, like again, you talked about the helmets, and really it's a data collection device, right? And there's, you know, there's an action and a reaction. Lift your head up when you tackle. Given what you know about concussions and what it does to your brain, CTE, you know, again, I'm not sure if that is, you know, how do I say it, officially recognized by everyone, but you know that there's definitely a causality there. How do you think about this, you know, kind of people going through some of these mental challenges, and what innovation can come from that would help us deal with our parents, you know, our kids who have challenges?
So the consequences of concussion, when you see them, we all know, and everybody is very aware of things like headaches and dizziness, sometimes sleep changes and thinking problems. But one of the most common changes associated with concussion and other brain injuries is a mood change. Irritability is by far the most common, anxiety and depression. And then you ask yourself, why is this? And that is because all of those things are brain-based. So I'd go further, not only just to destigmatize anxiety, depression, or psychiatric disease, but go further to say this is brain-based. If you have a migraine, we all accept that's brain-based. If you have a stroke, that's brain-based. If you get a concussion, that's brain-based. If you have anxiety, that is brain-based. If you have depression, that is brain-based. And so when we look at the technologies that we ask ourselves, that we're constantly monitoring our heart rate, our oxygen saturation. I look at my heart, or my watch, I can get an EKG. I can track how much I'm sleeping. There are apps that include things like mindfulness, because all of those things are together. And if we utilize them together and we don't separate them like we have with our healthcare system of physical and mental health, if we don't separate them, then we're going to be more aware of them. For him, you may have known, well, he took cholesterol medication because he had high cholesterol, but you didn't know about his mental health.
Can I ask a question? Because I love that statement, right? You know, that we should be measuring some of those things. For me, EKG, heart rate, you know, David Banner was talking about his blood pressure. There's a well-defined range of acceptability. Is the science advanced enough to have a well-defined range for some of these neurocognitive functions?
Yes, there are batteries. There are known batteries that are used all the time that are, again, currently sequestered in the mental health world that we ask about of our patients. Because most of what we ask, yes, we are measuring blood pressure, we're measuring heart rate, but if you walk into an emergency department and you say, guess what's going on with me, and you don't say, I have terrible chest pain, nobody's going to check you for a heart attack. Because if you do, and this is kind of one of the problems, without a symptoms-based approach, we can't do our jobs. The majority of what physicians do when we see a patient is take a history, an accurate history.
Does that include your family, you know, kind of legacy? I mean, we were just talking about it on the last panel. I mean, is that a part of it? Okay.
Very much so, and it can give you clues. Because indeed, mental health is so stigmatized that you may ask somebody if they experience anxiety or depression, and they'll say no, and you'll ask if a family member has said that, yes, my mom or my dad, and you're like, well, okay, well, there's a very good chance that you might be experiencing this right now.
So I love my mother, right, like everyone does, and she may be mad at me if she sees this, but we have mental illness in my family. We don't talk about it. And actually, we deny it. And I was doing some work on Ancestry.com, and I found an article about my mother's grandfather, my great-grandfather, and the heading was "Despondent Negro Jumps to His Death." right? That was the headline in the newspaper. But we don't talk about it. So to your point, kind of acknowledging it, measuring it, and understanding that if you see this early enough, there are treatments and there are kind of science behind helping someone get to have the best life that they can, right? Maybe not everything is curable, and that's another question, right? Are we going to get to a place where some of these things, what's the quarterback from the Bears, Jim McMahon, right? Mm-hmm. Wears the sunglasses. I'm guessing that he has some CTE, kind of issues. Again, no, I don't know Jim McMahon, but are we going to get to a place where we can treat and diagnose and treat and help people get better even after this kind of traumatic brain issue?
Absolutely. So there's several pieces to that, because I think there are many people who feel that after those repetitive head impacts, which, by the way, I would go further to say that in our youth, the concussion protocols, the decrease in the head impact exposure, all those things have decreased concussion in these populations, decreased repeated concussion, and my hope is in the future it will decrease the incidence of CTE. Until then, I think that there are people who will die from the disease and die with the disease. And the reason I say that is there are many elements of the disease that are treatable. The depression, the anxiety, those things are treatable. They don't have to consume you. Some of the cognitive deficits are manageable. You might not be able to completely defeat them, but you can have good quality of life with the disease rather than succumb from the disease.
That's good to hear, right? It gives us hope, right? And we need some hope right now, for sure.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Ed.
So no, that's you're speaking directly to why I created the chatbot.
So I was just going to bring that up. Just talk about it and say what it is, and then speak about kind of the specificity of it.
So my wife is a family medicine physician, and over the years we've been together a long time, 16 years old. So through college, medical school. Anyway, so many of my friends, because of that, are doctors, and I watched as we were talking about this last night, as the electronic medical record systems rolled out and everything, and insurance and everything, the time that doctors are able to spend with patients was shortening, and they're not able to practice the way that they would ideally like to practice. And so there's a barrage of screeners, I'll call them, that they would like to give people. But the paperwork, remember the clipboards in doctors' offices, right? And the page is this wide, and you go and you're supposed to answer those. That takes 20 to 45 minutes to answer all of the ones that they would like to do. Amongst them, the PHQ, GAD, so those are the depression screens, the general anxiety screens, PTSD, suicide risk, all of those things. The other part is when the nurses, it's a requirement to ask these questions, but as you know, people will sit across from you, just maybe attempted suicide the day before. Do you have suicidal thoughts? No, I do not. They won't tell people sitting in front of them, but they will tell their phone. And so I made a system in the HealthBot that actually asks it, and it takes it away from takes the stigma away, even though the people know that in 5 minutes, their answers are going to get analyzed. People are fascinating. We're fascinating creatures.
Well, that's interesting because, especially given the rise of AI, I remember having a conversation with Ben Horowitz, who's kind of one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz, and he was saying that this was probably 15 years ago. They were working on algorithms that could detect if you were going to go to the movies. And the number one predictor is people would do a search for babysitters. Right? And so, to your point, there are data that people are looking for and are asking questions that are actually misleading them, where there are these real data that should be paid attention to that actually could lead to better outcomes.
Right. This is the challenging part with creating technology for clinical. Because one of the things, and I'm biased, I want doctors to still be the final call.
You said something important too, and I don't want to glaze over it. Is that doctors? We consider doctors to be part of the medical industrial complex, but they go into medicine to help people.
These people are special. Doctors are different kinds of people, and not to big up you just because you're here. Doctors are different. The ones who are in it just to make money, like when people complain, "Oh, you just want me to come back for my copay." I personally do not know any doctors who that is true for. They're not doing it for the $40, $20 copay. These people have gone through so much schooling and everything. The ones who are in it for that are in different businesses. So
No, I want to make sure we kind of acknowledge that
Yeah.
point, but I want to get back to the technology and kind
So
of
the
solving
technology,
problems.
what I'm very careful about doing, one is the privacy issue. I don't want any of the people who use my tools, their information to be out there so that they can get dinged by insurers or what have you. So I'm weird. I don't have databases. I'm like, if somebody hacked the systems, there are no systems to hack. It's a tool for the patient and the doctor so that that connection happens. As opposed to a lot of people talking about AI doctors and things like that, there has to be a human in the mix. And that human needs to be a doctor, a real clinician. Without that, I think we go into very dangerous territory.
No, it makes perfect sense. And Dr. Cardenas, this football conversation that we've been having, like it's a kid's game, right? That grown men play, and Takeo played it at a super high level. My friend Marlon played at a high level. This affects us disproportionately because right now in the NFL, and this is just the NFL, 70% or so of the players are African American.
75%.
75.
Yes.
So it's a real, because again, I play football and I shouldn't have been playing football. I was like 135 pounds soaking wet, right? 6'2", 135 pounds. I had no business out there, right? But this is an important thing, and the truth is that concussions don't start when you get to the NFL. They don't start in college, they start earlier, right? So I'm curious, given the data that Ed talked about and the technologies exists, kind of from the AI providers, how do you think about using the data that are available to, kind of make sure that people are getting the right treatment? Again, because we have different health needs, we have different backgrounds, et cetera.
From my perspective, there's the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. If you get data just for the sake of data, and you're not doing anything with it, or you're just putting out, then it's really not going to be informative. And it's usually not just a single data point. So everybody thinks there's going to be one magic bullet, and that's the thing that you're going to change, and then everything will be okay. But there are so many data points from so many different perspectives. So for example, while we're tracking helmet impacts, we're also looking at sleep. We're also looking at how fast people are moving up and down a field. We're also looking at heart rate variability. And we're asking about mood, and we're asking about how they're feeling. And we don't ask it, are you anxious, are you depressed? Like, are you feeling pressured? Are you feeling that your teammates are bothering you? That kind of thing, where we can really get to that information. And then I think the biggest part of all of the data that we collect is the feedback. Now that we have this data, what are you going to do about it as an individual or as a group to affect change? Because otherwise it's just data for data's sake, and you're like, oh, I'm in the green, thumbs up.
You touched on a lot of interesting kind of analytical data science principles there we don't have time to talk about today, but I do want to leave with just this one thought, right? Which I've been asking throughout the course of the day. Everyone's going to leave here. Hopefully I saw someone taking notes on the iPad back there. They have really good information. What do they do with that information when they get back home, when they get back to the office, when they get to the doctor's office? What's the one thing that you would recommend that people do?
Yeah, for me, what I would tell people is, when you're taking that data in, ask your physician, like, how can a change in my behavior, a change in my health affect this outcome?
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful question. So we're noting all these. We're going to share them with everyone here and the rest of the world later. But Ed, what's your one thing, your Monday morning
How can I improve
message?
on
Well, no, you just have to do something different.
Just really be honest with the professionals. That's the thing. People go into, especially in the mental health area, be honest. Just be vulnerable. As men, black men, tell what's happening. There are too many. My wife has had patients over the years where if they had just said something 10 visits ago, they would have avoided years of misery.
That's a perfect way to end this because, again, if we're not honest, if we're not sharing in community, if we're not engaging in conversation, we suffer in silence. So that's fantastic. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.